looks like she got a little Latin in
Okay.
it. That's always the way. Good afternoon. Happy New Year, everybody. Welcome back, Arturo Chavez and everyone else to the Housing Committee. Today is January 10th, 2018. We are in room 1010, City Hall, Los Angeles, California, 90012. January 10th, 2018. And I am Gil Cedillo, Chair. We got the sound right? Got an echo. Okay. Okay, so let's start. We're going to do public comment first. So I've got a total of 3 minutes each for Patricia McAllister, Wayne. Is that it?
Those are the only two.
Okay. So please join us. You've got 3 minutes each.
Okay, under public comment, the Housing Committee, this is for housing. Now, as I said earlier, we don't have a shortage of housing, affordable housing. We have about 2 million illegal aliens in Los Angeles. Now, I've done the research. We've got about 80% of the students in LAUSD are illegals. They're Hispanic, Latino, and Asian. Go on the city's website, go on LAUSD's website, and you'll find it. Look on their fingertip. They break it down by race. Okay, so I'm not lying, it's there. Okay, now here's the deal. These children, we're paying for this. Okay, now, the children tells us that their parents, they're living with their parents. They're not on the street. They're living with their parents in affordable housing. That's where they are. Okay, so that's 500,000 of them, because it's 700,000. 80% is about 500,000. Then you add another 300,000 for the 5 kids they got in the parents. So we're talking about, and then all the homeless, we're talking about 2 million illegals. Now, I've done research throughout the whole county, Los Angeles County, and they dominate in every county. Latinos, Hispanics, and Asians. So we've really suffered an invasion, but the media is not going to talk about that. And how did this happen? You guys. I believe you're getting paid under the table cash money. Cash money to, and not only are you helping to smuggle these illegals in, you're protecting them from being deported. And Attorney General Sessions is talking about arresting you, and I want to be around when they start handcuffing your rear ends. So you're not going to take this country from me. My ancestors built this nation. You're not going to bring in all these foreigners, protect them because you want to make some money. You're not even thinking about your own children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. You're thinking about making a few dollars so you can get on a boat and start doing your pedophilia and drug stuff and all these parties you'd like to do. Okay, now this man you're giving this money to, I'm looking at some other things in here, you're just giving away money. Here, these people that's supposed to be educating people about violations and whatnot and on their housing and paying the city the rent. I wouldn't pay the city any rent. The city, all you're doing is collecting. You know why you're collecting? You're not getting any money from these 2 million illegals. See, that's why we're seeing all these fees and fines, because they are not paying taxes. So not only the city, but the governor. All of these taxes and fees, we've got to be caught with it because the illegals are not paying it. They're paying you, but we're not getting it. And I'm very proud because I was on the web doing this a lot. Gutierrez out of Illinois is stepping down. He's the one that's been arrested all the time for trying to protect these illegal aliens. Well, they got him. 80% of his money he was funneling to his wife, and it goes back into his pocket. They got him, okay? So they're going to get some more of you, don't worry. But they got him. He said he's not going to run again. He's coming out of Congress. Luis Gutierrez out of Illinois. I'm from Illinois. Thank you.
Very good. So, looking on the subject, item 3, we're doing the Disability Commission just now today. The 10-year settlement is $200 million over 10 years. So what happened? Affordable housing with accessibility built into the projects. The developers were allowed by you and the Building and Safety Department to steal federal and state funds to make it ADA accessible apartments. They never did it. The city signed off that they were compliant, and they never were. This does not include the $995 million federal case that's coming up. This is only the state one. So I'm here right now. If you've got a check for $995 million payable to the United States Treasury to settle a case, I'll take it. I'll fly to Washington. I'll give it to Donald Trump with my 2% commission. So I don't see anybody handing me a check. And it's only $995 million. You got that. You got $7 billion in the bank. I was right here in this room in November. $6.9975 billion. You guys got cash. So it's only $995 million, but you won't pay it. So now you get to the city of Los Angeles owned buildings. You're supposedly going to make them subject to rent stabilization. I got something in the mail I didn't like from the HCIDLA. They're trying to make my C21 zoned property subject to RSO on my one apartment. I only have one apartment. It's never been rented. It's been in our family since 1952 when we had the original certificate, and the motherfuckers are starting to make me pay a rent stabilization fee. It's C21 zoned, it's not R zoned, it should be exempt, and they won't exempt me, and they keep fucking me. And they're doing it to thousands of other C21s that happen to have pre-reform pre-1978 rentals in C21 zone buildings. You used to be able to do it, and they were subject to exemptions. Now I can't get my exemption, so I have 18 pages of shit that I have to go to 7th Street and give to HCIDLA because they're trying to fuck me again. Then, nice part, on the 19th of December, and I called the chair's office to let him know that a DWP truck cut the power lines off of my building claiming it was vacant. Stop terrorizing people and get people into affordable housing. That's the answer. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I almost forgot.
Okay, that concludes public comment. Let's go to...
Do you wish to go to item 1?
I do wish to go to item 1.
Item number 1, Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department reports and City Administrative Officer to report relative to request for approval to execute disposition and development agreements and owners' participation agreements for the development of affordable housing on city-owned properties. This item was referred to Homelessness and Poverty Committee and heard this morning.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Cedillo, members of the committee. My name is Sean Spear. I'm the Assistant General Manager for Housing Development with the Housing Department. I'm joined by Helmi, Hysteric, our Director of Housing Strategies and Services, as well as Mariana Lim, who is our Manager of our Land Development Unit. I wanted to just quickly mention to you that we are bringing before you, as part of this item, a set of 9 potential approvals for the DDAs and OPAs for city-owned parcels. They are a combination of parcels that were inherited from the CRA as well as other city resources. The primary thing is that out of these first 9, 3 of them will be pursuing state resources next week. It includes 2 that are going for cap and trade dollars, as well as 1 that will be strictly going for infrastructure dollars. So the timing of your consideration and potential movement to the full city council is very important. Out of these 9 deals, we are expecting to produce 678 units of affordable housing, 515 of which would be permanent supportive housing. So we're going to turn to Helmi, who will give you a little bit more detail on the individual parcels and the schedule of actions to occur going forward.
Good afternoon. I'm Helmi Hysteric, Director of Housing, strategies and services. And the overview that I want to give you is to explain a little bit about the process and a few of the highlights of the properties. What you have before you are term sheets for development agreements and a draft development agreement and a draft owner participation agreement, which are the form of agreement that we'll be using to execute with the developments. All of the developments that are proposed on public property will be going for HHH funds, and they have to compete for those funds. Before they can be awarded those funds, we have to execute a development agreement on the land so that they have site control. And this approval will give these developers site control. If the developers pursue the terms of the agreement and are successfully awarded funds, then we as a city will be obligated to either lease or sell the property to the developer based on the terms that we've agreed to. As Sean mentioned, 7 of these properties were former CRA properties. 2 of these properties are surplus properties of the city that came to the department through the Affordable Housing Opportunity Sites process, working closely with the CAO's office. One of the properties, notably, is quite large. The project is on 557 Crocker in Council District 14. It's an 18-story tower in the Skid Row area. So that is the largest of the projects that's being proposed. One property at 11950 West Missouri in Council District 11 is a former animal shelter that will be demolished, and a project will be built, affordable housing development will be built on that site. And one property at 2600 South Hoover in CD9 is an existing historic building that will be rehabilitated and created for permanent supportive housing. The rest of the sites are vacant sites. They'll all be new development. These will all be new permanent supportive housing and affordable housing units for the city's supply. And I just want to acknowledge the incredibly hard work done by Mariana Lem, who's been managing this land development unit, and she and her team have done an extraordinary job in putting together development agreements in a very short time frame so that these projects can apply for funding in the time frame needed. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the projects.
Good afternoon. Emily Zen-Cervantes from the Office of the City Administrative Officer. We reviewed the HID's transmittal. In addition, subsequent to the release of their transmittal, they had an addendum. They wanted to include an additional property that's related to the 88th and Vermont permanent supportive housing project. And after they released their addendum, they also notified our office that there are concerns with the existing amended and restated option agreement, and they wanted to make sure that there was council action to allow the developer to continue to have site control while they're applying for additional financing. In general, we concur with their recommendations, so our office recommends that the council, subject to the approval of the mayor, 1, adopt recommendation 2A and B of the related Housing and Community Investment Department transmittal dated December 20th, 2017, relative to the request to execute disposition and development agreements or owner participation agreements with selected developers. 2, adopt recommendation 2A through E of the related HCID addendum to the above transmittal dated December 28th, 2017, relative to the disposition of 2 city-owned properties for the development of the 88th and Vermont Permanent Supportive Housing Project. And 3, authorize the General Manager, Housing and Community Investment Department, or designate to A, negotiate and execute an extension to the amended and restated option agreement with 88th and Vermont LP for the ground leasing of the city-owned parcels comprised of the Los Angeles Department of Transportation parcel located at 8707 South Menlo Avenue, and the Department of Recreation and Parks parcels located at 8742 and 8750 South Vermont Avenue for 3 months from February 28, 2018 through May 31st, 2018. And B, negotiate and execute the appropriate land conveyance document upon final adoption of the ordinance to convey the city-owned properties for the development of the 88th and Vermont Permanent Supportive Housing Project. And finally, to prepare controller instructions and any necessary technical corrections consistent with the mayor and council. Action on this matter is subject to the approval of the CAO and authorize the controller to implement the instructions.
Can you repeat that? Just kidding. Any comments?
So this is the 88th and Vermont is a piece of property that we've been working on for some years, actually predates my time here on the council, and it turns out that a small sliver of land next to it belongs to Rec and Parks, and another sliver belongs to another department, and so each of them have different rules for how that land can be made available for the development. And I think what I heard now was a recitation of what our requirements are to avail the developer of site control.
That's correct. That's, that they basically have to negotiate for those other two parcels to be included into the overall site.
Okay. Anyone else? Now we have we're amending the recommendation to instruct HSID to obtain Council District 7 approval prior to executing contract.
Mr. Chair, can we get a motion to amend?
Yeah, motion to amend.
Second.
Right. To amend, to instruct HSID to obtain Council District 7 approval prior to executing the contract for the project located at 13574 West Foothill Boulevard. That's in District 7. Okay,
Sir.
Everybody has?
Well,
Any other, congratulations. This is significant, I think. It's 500, at least 515 permanent supportive housing units, 678. That's significant. It's a good day. It's a good week. It's a good way to start the year. If we can use this as a launching point and build momentum off of this, this is good. So, yeah, anybody else? Okay, so we have a motion.
You don't need a motion. You can just simply recommend approval.
Okay, so we move approval. No objection. Unanimous. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay.
Do you wish to now go to item 2?
Yes.
Item number 2 is a motion, Cedillo O'Farrell, relative to a request to amend the rent stabilization ordinance to apply to Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles owned buildings that are market rate or otherwise not affordable, covenant restricted, or Section 8 project based.
Okay. Can we take public comment first? We've got 1 minute for Andrea Ringer? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm an attorney at, my name is Andrea Ringer. I'm an attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services of Los Angeles. We represent several tenants at Reflections of Yosemite properties, which have many market rate rental units owned by the Housing Authority. So we are here to support the motion to amend the rent stabilization ordinance. And the problem as we see it is they own about 1,124 market rate rental units, which have no subsidies to keep the rents affordable. Most of these are rented to elderly, disabled tenants on low fixed incomes. In 2016, HACLA imposed rent increases of 25 to 65% on many of these tenants. This sort of increase can cause up to 2,000 elderly and disabled tenants to become homeless. And this was not the first time that they imposed such an increase. LARSO limits, as you know.
Go ahead.
Thank you all. I'll rush through. It limits annual rent increases to 3%. HACLA claims it's exempt from LARSO in its market rate units. LARSO appears to exempt HACLA except when rent subsidies are discontinued. This ambiguity led a judge to rule that HACLA is exempt from LARSO in its market rate rental units. City Council we believe the history of LARSO is that City Council assumed that HACLA subsidized all of its rental units, and in fact, that's not the case. We see that LARSO in the past has been regularly amended to increase tenant protections, not reduce them. So we see that this motion is an opportunity to increase tenant protections in these sort of units that are not protected from rent increases.
Okay, let's get, we have somebody here from HACLA or HCID.
Good afternoon, council members. Anna Ortega, Director of Rent Stabilization. I will just say that the previous speaker is correct. The rent stabilization ordinance currently exempts all HACLA-owned and operated rental housing. So at the present time, any HACLA-owned and operated units are exempt from the RSO. That would include any market rate units. I don't think that most policymakers were aware that they actually have market rate units. It is assumed, I think, that it's affordable housing subsidized. But the way the current language is written, the exception applies to everything that HACLA owns and operates.
I guess I'm curious, and I'm glad we're in the presence of our budget chair. Displacing these properties under rent control tire hands, under some regulations, rent stabilization regulations, tire hands later or make the property less valuable? Should HACLA have to sell it for some reason?
Well, that would change the economics maybe of the properties, because right now they're free of any restrictions whatsoever on their rent rates, unless of course their subsidies or their regulatory agreements have some limitations.
So why wouldn't HACLA just keep the rent low? I'm just really asking. I'm curious about this.
I can't answer for HACLA. I can't answer for HACLA.
Mr. McCoy?
Yeah, I had the same confusion about this. An agency whose mission is fundamentally providing affordable housing in Los Angeles, raising rents beyond what would be allowed under a rent control ordinance, just seems incongruous to me. So I certainly welcome this motion and getting the report back. I think one of the things that I'd like to better understand when the report comes back, we don't need to just spitball it right now, but this can be as part of the report back, is what the context of HACLA's ownership of market rate housing is. Where does that housing come from? And if we were to amend the RSO to encompass HACLA-owned properties, this might be more of a city attorney question, but would it be feasible to include those properties for so long as HACLA owns them, so that it wouldn't have any effect on the overall marketability of the property if someday down the future HACLA wanted to dispose of them? There might be a RSO protection during the time of ownership and not otherwise. Now, if these are pre-1978 buildings, it would seem to me that as soon as HACLA would dispose of them, they would fall under the scope of the RSO anyway, without any change.
I would
right?
agree, yes.
So it seems to me that the only reason that these buildings, pre-78 buildings, would not be under the RSO is the happenstance of HACLA's ownership and the exclusion of government-owned properties from the RSO.
Right, it's that specific exclusion. It's not even for all government-owned properties, it's for HACLA-owned properties.
Okay, this just makes no sense to me. So then I guess I would also, and again, I don't begin to know what issues may be involved in doing such a thing as I'm about to suggest, so I'm just thinking out loud here, and maybe this will be part of the report so we can have a further discussion, but one of the reasons that we have an RSO currently based on pre-1978 buildings is because of the balance of economic needs of tenants and landlords. But when it comes to HACLA ownership, I don't know that we should really need to be concerned about the landlord's economic needs. So, because this is, again, an agency intended to provide affordability in the housing market. So I wonder if it might be feasible to include all HACLA-owned buildings under the RSO, whether they're pre-1978 buildings or not. And again, I don't know whether in the current portfolio there would be buildings that would be post-78 construction that, you know, would fall within this. But just considering the mission of the agency, I can't think of a good reason not to apply at least the RSO limitations for HACLA-owned properties. So, again, there may be a huge hornet's nest of legal issues that come into play here by changing the scope of the RSO with regard specifically to HACLA-owned properties, but I'd at least like to know that before we take an action on that. So if the report back could include expansion of this to include all HACLA-owned properties and not only those that would otherwise be subject to the RSO, I think that would be worthwhile to know. If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Did I
Clear?
explain that?
Yep.
So,
Is that clear? Okay. Ditto. I think it's clear what the intent and spirit is of this motion. Both the author and myself have this desire for us to look at every opportunity for us to create, consistent with the spirit of the RSO, affordability within those properties that we own and control or have responsibility for. And so we'd like a report back on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
So just for the record, my understanding is that you wish to continue the motion and to have HACLA and Housing Department report back on the project-based voucher system for Los Angeles residents at all of their market rate properties within 90 days. Is that your intention?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good. No objection?
And, okay, and we're ready for item 3?
Item 3.
Item 3 is a motion, Krikorian Cedillo, relative to authorization for the Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department to enter into a sole source contract with LCM Architects to serve as an expert accessibility consultant for a one-year term effective December 1st, 2017 through November 30th, 2018, as required by a 10-year settlement agreement with the Independent Living Center of Southern California.
Okay. Any questions? Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Laura Guglielmo with the Housing and Community Investment Department. I think this body is familiar with the settlement agreement we have with Independent Living Centers of Southern California et al. Under the agreement, there's a requirement that we hire a neutral architect to survey, review, and help us to sort of be the arbiter between the city and the plaintiffs over whether a particular unit or a particular complex meets the accessibility requirements of the federal accessibility requirements as well as the California accessibility requirements, and where there are differences. Under the settlement agreement, the plaintiffs are required to approve whoever we select. The plaintiffs provided a list of 5 names. The city, regardless, issued an RFP last spring and included the 5 names that the plaintiffs identified. At that time, we received 2 responses, none of whom were on the plaintiffs list, and whom the city, the evaluation team found non-responsive or didn't meet the minimum criteria. We then researched the 5 candidates that the plaintiffs had suggested more thoroughly and eliminated four for conflicts of interest with, not that they were not highly qualified firms, but they had conflicts of interest with the city and issues we were dealing with. So we started negotiations and talks with LCM Architects, who's based out of Chicago. They have been, among other things, implementing or helping this, the Chicago Housing Authority with their voluntary compliance agreement with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that has been going on for several years. And they came highly recommended not only by the plaintiffs, but by the Chicago's Housing Authority for their willingness and abilities in this area. And they have other clients as well and have been working extensively, primarily with cities, counties, and developers who are remedying deficiencies with their multifamily housing units to meet the federal accessibility requirements. So we are a little behind on our schedule because our RFP process didn't result in a greater candidate, so it took us a little longer to move this along. But we are confident that LCM Architects will have the ability, they have the willingness and the ability and to move this forward. So we're requesting authority to negotiate and execute an agreement and also to move funds. There are in the 2017-18 budget, there were funds for this contract placed in the unappropriated balance. However, rather than make that appropriation at this time, the city has, or the department has sufficient salary savings designated for the accessible housing program for which we can move from the salary account to the contractual services account and not require us to access the unappropriated balance at this time.
Better still.
So we respectfully request authority to move forward.
Okay, move to adopt.
Happy to answer any questions you have.
Just how does this fee compare with the other participants in the RFP and the other companies on the plaintiffs list?
The only area that I can really compare would be the hourly rates, because the scope of work we have presented is significantly more detailed than what we received from the others. However, the hourly rates we found to be very competitive and less than we anticipated. We obviously don't have experience in this area, but we expected that the actual cost would be significantly higher. So we were pleasantly surprised that the hourly rate was as reasonable as it is, and that the plan, the execution, the proposed path to complete the work would not be as extensive as we thought it might be. So, it was sort of a combination of both the hourly, the cost is lower than we anticipated because of the hourly rate and also the estimated time to complete the various tasks.
Great.
And
let's not tell them that.
Well, they have the, they seem to be a pretty conscientious firm and they have experience in this area, so they had a much better sense than the city had about how much time it will take. So, and we do anticipate that we will need to amend this agreement, but for the time being, this is our request, and then we'll include our request for the following year in the department's proposed budget for 2018-19, and can discuss it with the council at any time.
Very good. Thank you.
Good. Motion to adopt.
Okay, and just for your information, this item will be on a special agenda for council on Friday.
Excellent.
Thank you.
No objection. So be the order.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Item 4.
Item 4.
Item number 4, Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department report relative to the release of a request for proposals for tenant outreach and educational services for the rent escrow account program and the utility maintenance program.
Okay.
Good afternoon, council members. Rent escrow account program REAP
Excuse me.
is a...
Excuse me. Can you turn off your phone, please? Please turn it off.
And there are signs, by the way, for letting people know that they are not to have their phones on during the meetings.
Thank you.
You know, Mr. Spindler continues to disrupt this meeting as we're trying to have discussion, Mr. Chairman. This is not appropriate. He should be really excluded from the
And
meeting.
this has gone on for every single item for this meeting. We're now at the last item.
Please turn it off.
And keep quiet.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Roya Babazadeh, Director of Compliance in Housing and Community Investment Department. Rent escrow account program REAP is a successful enforcement program that intends to encourage property owners whose properties persistently have been in violation with housing code to bring their properties into compliance, safe and habitable condition, and maintain their properties. And also to prevent displacement of the tenants due to property owners' failure to pay the utility services. This program has been successful, bringing over thousands of units into compliance every year. We are accepting less number of properties and units into REAP than we are removing since 2010, and therefore we see decrease in the inventory of the REAP properties. Property owners that are in REAP, they learn how to maintain the property. They learn about the rights and responsibilities, and therefore when they are removed from their properties or removed from REAP, they maintain their properties, and rate of recidivism is very low for those property owners. We see properties that are in REAP are staying in REAP for a shorter period of time every year. And this success is partly due to contribution of the outreach program. There are two outreach components in this program. One is tenant outreach and education service that primarily 4 contractors provide services to the tenants. The transmittal before you is to request to release an RFP. The current contracts are going to expire by July 1st, 2018, and we would like to continue the services by entering into contracts with new proposers to have contracts in place by July 1st, 2018.
Okay. Any questions?
Could you tell us the very basic metrics for these contracts? How many households our expectation will be impacted by each of these groups?
Well, every year we, through the enforcement of REAP mainly, alongside with the legal enforcement that we have, we bring over 10,000 units into compliance.
Okay.
And these are mainly properties and units that are very low rent and affordable. And violations in these properties are extensive and persistent. And if it was not because of this program, these violations would continue. And this is expressed even by landlord organizations such as AGLA, recognizing the value of this enforcement to bring these properties into compliance, which otherwise would not be the case.
Thank you.
Good. 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 Okay, move to adopt. Right, so what we're doing. Move to adopt
There are no other items before the committee. Do you wish to adjourn?
Yes. Motion to adjourn? All right. No objection? So be the order.